This is Lunchtime Agenda.
Hello, welcome to Lunchtime Agenda. I'm Tom Connell. Well, when Arthur Sinodinos stood aside as Assistant Treasurer, he said he looked forward to getting back to the role after clearing his name. He's appearing today at the Independent Commission Against Corruption. He's not facing allegations. He's there as a witness, but so far he hasn't appeared to clear up all that much. Frustrating counsel at times, giving answers in plenty of occasions, saying that he doesn't recall some of the key facts and questions that he has been asked today. Our Sky News political reporter Laura Jays has been in this commission inquiry, and she filed this report just a short time ago.
Arthur Sinodinos has been questioned for just under 3 hours at the ICAC inquiry here in Sydney into Australian Water Holdings, and it's best described as a frustrated process dominated by Arthur Sinodinos unable to answer many questions. His reply most of the morning was, "I can't recall" or "I don't remember." But what was established is that Arthur Sinodinos was paid about $200,000 a year for between 25 and 46 hours worth of work plus travel time. Now, Arthur Sinodinos did acknowledge that the company had cash flow issues from time to time, but he wasn't aware that the company had accepted a $400,000 loan from the Obeid family at a time when it couldn't pay its tax bill or make superannuation contributions. Now, Sydney Water, its sole client, had raised concerns about ballooning costs, and it's alleged that some of those costs were in this form of soft costs or soft expenses, and they include $164,000 spent on a box at the football, $29,000 on limousines, and also, importantly, a further $160,000 in the form of a retainer to a Liberal Party fundraiser. There's also the question of a $73,000 political donation made to the New South Wales Liberal Party. Now, Arthur Sinodinos was Treasurer of the Liberal Party at the time, but he says he still has no specific knowledge of any political donations. For Arthur Sinodinos this morning, it wasn't a good look. At the very least, it paints him as a sloppy businessman who didn't do his due diligence. Arthur Sinodinos will be back in the witness box this afternoon. Laura Jays, Sky News, Sydney.
Well, for more on this and the rest of the day's political news, I'm joined by Labor MP Julie Owen. She's at our Sky News Centre, and also David Coleman. He is at our CBD studio, the Sydney City studio. Of course, he's a Liberal MP. Thank you both for your time today.
Good to be here.
David, I will just start with you. We've heard from Laura there about this ICAC hearing today. Now, Arthur Sinodinos might be facing any allegations, but you heard there that he says he wasn't aware when he was Treasurer of the Liberal Party and still at AWH about a more than $70,000 donation, that he approved of a measure whereby AWH didn't tell Sydney Water what it was charging them for when their admin costs tripled from $200,000 to $600,000 a month. How are, at the very least, the optics of this? Does it look, in your reckoning, according to what we've just heard there, like this is the sort of person the government would want back as Assistant Treasurer?
Well, look, Tom, I think as you said at the outset, there are no allegations against Arthur Sinodinos. He's fully cooperating with the inquiry as a witness. He's stepped aside from his ministerial duties while that process takes its course, which is appropriate, and we look forward to him coming back to the front bench. But he's a witness before this inquiry, as many other people are, and he's behaving in an entirely appropriate way.
He appears to be frustrating the council there, at the very least. His lack of apparent knowledge on the dealings of this company. I mean, at a position such as Assistant Treasurer, it's someone that should be across these sort of details. We always have heard of him as an impressive man as Chief of Staff of John Howard for many years. What's happened is his lack of, or his attention to detail, has that slipped in his corporate roles here?
Oh, look, Arthur, as you say, is a very impressive man. He has tremendous experience across a long period of time, and he is fully cooperating with the inquiry. He's answering the questions as they're put to him, and that's entirely appropriate. So I think that as a witness in the inquiry, he's answering the questions, and that's appropriate. And we look forward to him finishing that process and coming back into the ministry.
Julie Owens, Labor obviously can't, or you would say can't jump up and down to too much about this, given the fact that one of the key links made with Arthur Sinodinos was with the infamous Obeid surname.
Look, I'm a member of the federal parliament, and I've sat in the parliament for several weeks now and heard the Prime Minister ask what he knew about Arthur Sinodinos' work in Australian Water Holdings and got no answers. And the Senate, of course, didn't get answers from Arthur Sinodinos either. So that's what I'm concerned about, is that we currently have a person who is a member of the ministry who has stepped aside, even though there's no way that that can actually happen. He's stepped aside for the moment, yet he hasn't actually answered the questions in front of the Parliament. So, you know, he's got some questions to answer when we return.
Did Labor help set a new standard for when ministers do or don't step aside? Craig Thompson obviously wasn't a minister, but staying in Parliament as a member of the Labor Party for so long with the numbers so finely balanced.
Craig Thompson was not a member of the ministry, and when he was removed from the Labor Party, he stayed in the Parliament. There isn't actually a way to remove a person from the Parliament, by the way. They're elected by the people of their electorate. But he was not a member of the ministry, and I think, you know, historically over 100 years of Australian governments, the way that ministers are required to behave is supposed to be at a very high standard, and if there are questions over the behaviour of a minister, it's usual for them to stand down very, very quickly. That didn't happen in the case of Arthur Sinodinos, and again we've seen a Prime Minister who's not prepared to answer any questions at all about what he knew.
Tom, sorry, if I could just jump in there. I mean, you know, let's be clear, there are no allegations against Arthur Sinodinos. He stepped aside in the best Westminster tradition as a witness before the inquiry. There are no allegations against him. He's fully cooperating. He's doing absolutely the right thing, and that's what we would all expect of him.
All right, well, there's a bit to run out there. He's going to give further evidence after this lunch recess, so we'll have plenty more from our reporter on the spot there, Laura Jays. I'll move on. Go back to you, Julie Owens, when it comes to some of these job losses we've heard about lately. More today from Boeing. Now, Labor's talking them up to some degree. The unions are saying, well, no, it's just a bit of cyclical job loss. Contracts are ending. And then yesterday we had the BP oil refinery. Well, we know that oil refineries closed under Labor as well. What's the difference between one closing under Labor and one under the current government?
Yes, they do. Industry does close and new industries emerge. So there's two things here. One, when we were in government, and if we were in government now, we would be acting very, very quickly to provide appropriate support for those employees to transition. You know, in the global financial crisis and when we had difficulties with major firms, we were very quick to adjust the Centrelink rules so that help could be provided and training could be provided very, very quickly. The other, which this government isn't prepared to do in any case, we've seen very little action for this government, in fact no action on helping workers. The other side of it is this government is not investing in what comes next. They're pulling back funding out of renewables. They don't have a Minister for Science, they don't have a Minister for Innovation. They've ripped $1 billion out of the R&D tax incentives. So they're actually pulling back on the future job creation as well, while not providing assistance for people who are losing their jobs.
David Coleman, there's a point I'll pick up on there. I think plenty of people, in fact, would agree with perhaps ending this so-called corporate welfare, some industries that were not going to survive in the long term, such as the car industry. But wouldn't it have made sense for the Abbott government to have had a concrete plan, perhaps actually say that we're going to use this money that was used for subsidising things, for other things, for training, whatever it might be, R&D, to really come out with a comprehensive plan, big impressive news conference, maybe a glossy brochure or two, and actually have a bit of initiative in this area?
Well, Tom, look, I think the first point is that obviously, you know, none of us like to see job losses, and we all feel for the people who are directly affected. The question is, what do you do about it? And I think to pick up on your comment about glossy brochures and press releases, you know, that's Labor's style of doing things. Our style of doing things is to focus on the substance of what actually creates jobs in the economy. And there's a number of ways you do that. Firstly, you get rid of bad taxes. So you get rid of the carbon tax and the mining tax, which reduce economic activity and cost jobs. We want to get rid of those taxes. We're being frustrated in that attempt at the moment by the Labor Party. You get environmental approvals happening so that big projects can go ahead. $400 billion worth of projects have been approved under this government. You build the infrastructure in roads and so on. But Tom, I think this is an important distinction, because the way you create jobs is by creating the economic infrastructure and growth that drives the economy. And in February, in fact, we had the largest new jobs created since 1991.
Yeah, I know, I'm aware of that. We have pointed that a few times out today on Sky News as well. David Coleman, I want to go quickly to this inquiry into Reza Barati's death in Manus Island and the violence there. It's not going to be made public at all. We're not going to find out what has made of this inquiry. Why not release it?
Oh, well, Tom, this is a provisional inquiry, and the process is a report rather, and the process is ongoing. It's obviously a very important matter. This was a very serious incident that occurred, and it needs to be treated in a serious way. The final report, when it's available, will be released by the government. And just to be clear, that during the provisional process of reports into other riots at Nauru and Villawood and Christmas Island, Labor didn't release those provisional reports either. So I think this is entirely appropriate action by the Minister.
Julie Owens, I think David Coleman makes one good point there at least, in that bipartisanship has been to the fore when it comes to secrecy on this issue. We hardly saw, for example, journalists allowed into these camps, these detention camps when Labor were in power. You can't really blame them now for adopting a pretty similar policy.
I don't think you compare the Labor government with the Abbott government in terms of secrecy on the treatment of asylum seekers. We never called it national security, and we actually reported on a regular basis, as you would know. In fact, there was an incredible amount of information out there, and the opposition at the time
demanded it. There was more on the old on-water activities, I suppose.
And the opposition demanded it at the time, and demanded it when we had a report into an incident as well. They demanded it then. They're holding themselves to different standards now, and they are, of course, the government. So they're the government now. They set the standard in opposition. They really should adhere to it now that they're in government.
Okay, I am going to have to leave it there. Thank you both, Julie Owens and David Coleman, for your time today on Lunchtime Agenda.